I am indeed really happy that the commitment what we made a year back to start this human rights course across the board, first in the university campus, that commitment we are fulfilling today. And I am indeed proud, as noted by Professor Gade and Dr. Shastri, that we are first, probably in the country, the first university in the country to start this human rights course. From next academic year, we'll extend this course across the board to all our affiliated colleges in 3 districts, Pune, Nasik and Ahmednagar. Even though we have started this course, I am sure that many in the hall and most of the students outside the hall in our university must be thinking that why university is insisting that we have to start this human rights course. I can be a student of physics or chemistry or mathematics or history or political science or even management. Many management students are sitting here. I have to necessarily go or rather take the human rights course. What is the significance of this and why is that? I think this is the first of its kind, the first course where which is being made compulsory for all students. So what is the significance of the course? What I am trying to do today is to put this whole human rights discourse in the perspective so that our students will have a fair idea as to what human rights stand for. Most of us probably know human rights when it comes to the violation or the death of someone in the prison, or violation of some prisoners of war, or maybe if you may be reading or you might have read in the newspaper about killing by Saddam Hussein or some atrocities around. Is that what the human right is? Probably it is not. It's something much more comprehensive and beyond what probably it is known and perceived by students and common people. All of you are aware that our constitution, the Constitution of India, basically talks about one man, one value for our country. All of us, we know that. Human rights discourse, if I had to put it, it is basically an international legal framework which talks about one man, one value concept across the globe. Whether you are born in America, whether you are born in China, whether you are a part of tribal culture in Africa, or you are born in Haiti or Singapore, if you belong to a Muslim religion, you belong to Christian religion, or you belong to Jews, irrespective of all your differentiations what exists today in the globe, human rights says that there are some basic minimum standards and there are some basic minimum rights which are accrued to you irrespective of all your divisions by being human. So this is what I think it is very critical of human right. It wants to build the society, a true sense, a global society with one value. And it is not only civil right, that also we must say, it's not only about what we talk about the torture and killing and all that. It is also a very important dimension of the development. I'll come to that in details, but human right is a comprehensive discourse which talks about not only the civil liberties, but also it talks about the developmental rights. And thus I think the significance, and this significance has to be understood by all our students, and that's why I think we have made this course compulsory. I think in the introduction you were told that the genesis of the human right discourse, it lies in the Second World War. Yes, it does. In fact, the genocide, what we call, in fact, the genocide word itself, it didn't exist before the world leaders realized what really happened during the Second World War, and 6 million Jews were killed. It really shocked the conscience of the world leader. I must say that the killing of the Jews was something very different. Why it was different? It was different because the state which is supposed to protect the subjects killed its own subject. Now this is something very defining, and this is also something very defining about the Human Rights Act or the whole human rights movement. The human rights movement says, in fact, it transgresses the sovereignty of the state. It says it is not the sovereign right of a particular state to give or not to give, but United Nations says that all countries, all nations in the world, they have to give the specific and the basic and fundamental human rights. So this is what, on this backdrop, United Nations adopted Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as all of you know, in 1948. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is called something as what Mrs. Roosevelt, who was the chairperson of the committee which drafted this declaration, said it's basically the Magna Carta of all mankind of the globe. She compared this with the Magna Carta for all human beings of the globe. The first article, it says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It talks about the human dignity, which is the basic and fundamental of what the human right discourse is. Now, to operationalize, because this is sort of constitution, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a sort of constitution. To operationalize this constitution, United Nations passed two important covenants, the international covenants. When we talk about the covenant are something which are passed, the covenant is passed by the UN, and then it is adopted by the nations. So the nations, they are party to that. And once they are party, they are supposed to subscribe to what exactly is there in the covenant. So United Nations passed two important covenants. One is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Probably we know much more about it, and that, of course, it talks about all the liberty, equality, self-determination, fair trial, provision against discrimination, rights of prisoners of war, and so on and all what you know about. Incidentally, the developing countries in the world, they said that it is not enough to talk about only the liberty and all what it's talked about, civil or political right. The developing countries said that the basic or the prerequisite and the essential component is the development. Unless people are developed and countries are developed, you can't really realize what is subscribed in the first covenant, that is civil and political right. Thus, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Right, that second covenant was passed. And this particular covenant talks about and takes care of all the development perspective, social perspective, and also the cultural perspective. After this, the human right, under this rubric, many other conventions and treaties have been made. Few importance I will highlight. The Covenant on Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, that was passed in 1969, and that was on the backdrop of the apartheid which was followed in South Africa. Then the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. This is something, a very significant covenant, and what we see effect today, in terms of rights of women, that the basis of that and the origin of that lies basically in this particular covenant. Then there is a Convention against torture that was passed in 1987. Then there is Convention on the Rights of Children. That's something so important. I was Secretary Women and Child Welfare Government of Maharashtra, and I know so many things we are doing. When we do the things and implement the scheme, then we don't know that the basis lies somewhere in United Nations or what Government of India does. But unless these theoretical frameworks are made, we cannot have the implementable strategies, and that's why the importance of all these covenants. See, still many people feel that this human rights discourse is utopian. It is something impossible to implement. It is something a Western hegemony. It is something what the Western world is trying to impose upon us. Even though, notwithstanding all this criticism, if you go through all these provisions, world has no option but to try to realize whatever is envisaged in the whole discourse of human right. I would just like to tell you that these things have not only remained in theory, but many of the actions we have seen in the world. You may be knowing the famous example of United Nations, particularly the United States getting mandate from the United Nations invading Iraq. Now, under the United Nations treaty or the whole philosophy of United Nations, of course no country can invade any other country. But this is mandated, this particular action was mandated under the human rights discourse by what they labeled as a humanitarian intervention. You may be knowing the intervention of the United Nations in Rwanda. You may be knowing or might have read about the Haiti, about the invasion in the erstwhile Yugoslavia, how the Slobodan Milosevic was tried, ultimately died, how Saddam Hussein was tried, how the Chilean president, who was the elected president, was tried, and how they were convicted. So these are all the examples that these not only remained in theory, but also we see a lot of actions at the international level which in some way have influenced the course of the world. You may be knowing something about Millennium Development Goal. People are talking, the UNDP is talking about the development across the world. This also in some way draws its inspiration from the economic and political, the economic and the social covenants. We talk about the rights of women, the reservation for the women, the women's bill. We talk about, as I already said, the right of children. All these are in some way, inspiration in the human rights. That's what something is very important. In India, we got Human Rights Commission in 1993. It's all from what is mandated because we are the partner to that at the UN level. In 1993, we established Human Rights Commission. So many cases are being tried and good judgments are being given. In Maharashtra too, we have State Human Rights Commission that was established probably in 2005. And you know, the Human Rights Commission is flooded with many cases, and people are getting their grievances redressed. This is something very important. So it is not only that it has remained in theory, but also all of us we see the effect of that in our day-to-day world. So what I say that the human rights as a phenomenal potential to change the world. I'll end by quoting what I read somewhere, that human rights is an instrument to influence and establish global human community based on principles of decency, morality, and human dignity. The movement has potential for greatest social transformation in the century. Let us play a very small part of that by knowing and learning something about these human rights in the university. Thank you.